Go ahead, Frank.
Hey, so I have some questions on some spiritual questions that I wrote down. I was going to ask you. So everyone knows that the biblical idea, image of Satan is pure evil.
Yes, as far as biblically, Satan is pure evil. He is the antithesis of God's alpha, I guess you could say. He's not Omega. He's not the end. God is the Alpha and Omega, but Satan is the kind of antagonist. No, not antagonist, but enemy that everyone fights in between along the journey towards the end result, which is God.
Okay, so does Satan exist in Hinduism text?
Yes, but not Satan. Not Satan behind that name. Satan is not called Satan in Hinduism. In Hinduism, Satan is more of a being of illusion, Maya. A lot of Hindus believe that Maya is more of a force than an actual conscious being, but Paramahansa Yogananda and his lineage believe that Satan is an actual being, an individual consciousness that works to counterbalance God and to drag people down towards the opposite of infinity, but which is increasing isolation and kind of a downward spiral into self-interest. So Satan does exist in Maya in Hinduism, but behind that name as an individual entity, not all Hindus believe that. A lot of Hindus believe that Maya illusion is just a force.
So this is what I was wondering if Satan, and so across the spectrum here we have some kind of spiritual being that's been cast out of the hierarchy to the lower realms. So in Hindus also believe in, okay, so you have two sides of the fence. You have Christians believing that you only get one chance. That
not all Christians reject reincarnation. It's been proven that the Second Conference on Constantinople actually took reincarnation out of Christianity, but reincarnation was in Christianity for a couple hundred years at one point.
So I'm wondering, so there seems to be like a problem that if we're all trying to, okay, so why can't the devil be saved?
The devil can be saved.
He can be saved.
Everything must be saved in the end and merged back into where it came. Just like when clouds form over the ocean and go over land and the water is rained down, it forms a river or it goes into a stream, whatever, and it eventually goes back to the ocean. Every part of God must return to God. If there was anything that was always separate from God, then there'd be two ultimate gods. So there'd be if two things were infinite and they were everlasting.
But even death, you're saying, the destruction in
every single thing must return back to God. So if there were two things that existed forever, then there'd be two different gods. But ultimately, I believe in different gods, but ultimately, well, my understanding of different gods is, functionalities of the same one God, but also their beings will mold back into the one God. But eventually, everything will come back to the one ultimate God, because there is only one God ultimately. There's only one God. If there's anything that exists beside that, it would be a different God. There'll be two different gods, always.
So if God has to destroy any aspect of himself, then you're saying that
God will never destroy any aspect of himself. There's no reason for it.
So even a particle, an atom, is a piece of God.
Everything.
Does it have consciousness?
To a degree.
What kind of consciousness does it have?
To a very simple degree. Just in its existence, every single part of existence, whether it be space, time, beings, material, human life, you can even say stars, every single thing in the universe, and all the universes, all the different dimensions, has consciousness to a certain degree because it came from God, and everything that came from God has a piece of his consciousness. It's all about magnitude, though. It's all about intensity.
A piece of his consciousness, meaning that they're just obeying the laws of...
There are certain laws that are set down in a physical nature and a metaphysical nature as well, in physics, as far as gravity, things like that. But they don't necessarily obey the law of God. It's just that they come from God and they are a certain quantity of God. So like all of creation is composed of things that are pieces of God to a certain degree. Like this table in front of me. That is God, to a lesser degree than I am God, because it's at a lower magnitude. It isn't as conscious as I am, but it is still a part of God, and it still has a certain essence of consciousness, because everything is made of consciousness.
What would be the reason for the table or atom or star to return to return back to God?
Because eventually the whatever the table is, eventually that matter will join with other matter, and eventually it will rise to the form of an animal, then it'll rise, or plant first, animal, then human, and then work its way through saint, through sage.
Right. But don't you have two different aspects of, like, you have the physical world, like in science you have the physical world, and then you have
what we see is not the physical world.
What do we see?
What we see is illusion. The actual consciousness of everything, the actual existence of everything, is not perceived by us with our physical senses, with our physical eyes. We can only see an element of it. Me observing the table in front of me. The table in front of me is not actually the form that I view, because my perception is flawed. I do not have the omniscience of God. I do not have the perfect perception of God, the perfect awareness of God. So I see a table, but it really isn't a table. It's part of something else. And I do not see the level of consciousness in this table. Obviously, the table doesn't look like it has any consciousness. But that's only not necessarily because of what the table is. It's because of my inability to see the table as having any level of consciousness. Because our perception is flawed, and it's not necessarily that anything else is limited or flawed. It's just that our perception is flawed. Now, the question that's very hard for me to answer, that I've never said before on YouTube, is that I don't know where one soul ends and when another soul begins. Because you could say that let's say this table has a soul. I believe it has a soul to a certain extent, but where does the soul end for the table? Is it in the screws? Is it in the legs? Is it connected to the floor? Is the floor also a part of the same soul? I don't know that answer. But I do know that everything created by God is connected to soul and has consciousness. We just only see the very fringe of its influence but in the material.
So, but the table cannot act upon anything. It is just
it can't act yet. That's why some things that are connected to soul, it takes many lifetimes of not being able to act, being stationary, before it starts to evolve to a higher level of consciousness.
So
everything is purified ultimately.
So then you can't look at it like it's a table. You have to look at it at the subatomic level.
You can look at it like it's a table, but that's only for human convenience. It's not because of its actual nature. I mean, me and you operate in this world, for instance, seeing everything as having a purpose, as being, okay, this is stationary, this is an object, this is an animal, this is a plant, this is a human. Humans have feelings. Some people believe animals have feelings, including myself. Some people don't. But these are all our flawed perceptions, and they are our limited perceptions, limited by time and space, with time and space ultimately being illusion.
Okay. Well, I see it that it's not, you're right, it's an illusion, it's not a table, but then again, if you look at it...
It's a part of something else, I guess you could say.
Only at the subatomic level. Is that true? Because...
I don't think so.
At our reality, at our level of in our realm, in our dimension, it's a table, but...
Our perception is flawed.
In another dimension, it's something else.
It's hard to understand, even for me, but in our dimension, this table is more than... We're talking a lot about this fucking table, but this table is more than it seems. And really what is limited is our limitations of being bound by time, space, and also our ability to comprehend and see consciousness. We can't see it with our senses or feel it or hear it with our senses that are unenlightened, untrained. So we view it just as a simple table. But this table, honestly, this table should have a name at this point, because we've been talking about this table a lot. Yeah. So you should totally name this goddamn table.
Okay, the monolith.
The monolith. No. Anyway, all right, let's go on to the future questions.
Right. Okay. So why does God allow suffering?
God doesn't necessarily allow suffering. We as pieces of God that have been cut off from the grander whole that we're working our way back to, we as individual pieces, we work our way through trying to understand the way to God. We're trying to understand our way to happiness, because the ultimate essence of everything is working towards happiness, joy, freedom from pain, freedom from isolation, freedom from finity, or being finite. But it takes a long time. Every single soul, every single person, every single animal, every single plant, has to do with evolution as well, physical and spiritual. We're working our way back to God. So we make a lot of missteps between here and there. I am still addicted to alcohol. I still drink, and that is my misstep that I'm learning from even now. But all these missteps are what cause us suffering. It's not God forcing suffering onto us. It's our own choices that bring suffering. And you can ask, okay, what about a woman that's walking home from work and is raped, or somebody who's just killed randomly? And in most religions, it's like, well, that's just how it came out. God didn't decide it; evil people did, and they had their free will, and that's just the luck of the draw. But in Hinduism, it's more that person had made mistakes in either a past life or this life that led to the karma that would happen. But that also doesn't justify somebody being allowed to rape or murder. And that person that raped or murdered will also be punished for the crime that they committed through karma. But through the karmic system, everything comes from something that caused it, based on that soul's choices. However, nobody has the right to rape or murder, and that every soul that does will be punished accordingly. Okay. And do you want to ask one more question?
That's well, the last question I probably have is, what do you think? Do you think there's angels that actually exist at a level to where they can change our consciousness?
I think there are angelic guides that are kind of like yogis, teachers, sages. I mean, I use the word teacher because that's what yogis and sages who teach are. They're teachers like we have in grade school, like in high school. There are angels who guide us towards the light because they are extensions of the light of God. So in Hinduism, we call them suras. You can sound that out and spell it. But in Christianity, angels. But a lot of Hindus say angels anyway because that's something the word that everybody knows. And they guide us towards the light because they're an extension of God's light. And then they curse demons and beat back demons, the forces of chaos. And I do believe that they exist and they guide us towards what we should do, what we need to do to progress along the spiritual path. Right. So I do think angels exist ultimately. I believe in different dimensions. Heaven and hell, I think they're different dimensions. I believe in multiple dimensions, ever expanding, but ultimately even finite infinities, like we learned earlier through a video that we watched. There are finite infinities in the sense that they're bound by how quickly you can count and how quickly you can observe the expansion, but ultimately God is beyond any expansion limited by time and space. So I think that these angels exist. They might be in other dimensions, and I think that they influence us on this earth and in all the different planets where there's life, everywhere ultimately, yeah. and in the different dimensions.
I think they do. They affect, if you have a strong spiritual affinity, I think that, I'm going to say this right, if you have a strong sense of spirituality, I think that there's these phases that you have positive energy, whether it's angels or whatever you're
Suras. I think they're ultimately the same thing. I just think that we call them by different
names.
It's
like you're going in a direction and then you just automatically you'll stop going in this negative direction and then you'll just change. And sometimes I wonder why did I think about what occurred to me, what thought process just happened. And it's just like, wow, I just had this thought, and I was going to do something, and then I instantly changed my mind.
Angels and demons, most of the time, look at us as like a flat circle. They see where we're going, they see what we're doing, and they try to influence us. But we can still choose. We have the freedom of choice.
Right.
So, like when you chose to do something better, maybe an angelic force is influencing you. Maybe it was completely in your free will. I don't know. But I think that angels and demons can inflict us in that way, and a lot of the time I can't identify when it's happening to me, luckily, but it took a lot of practice of spiritual life.
It does, I have to admit that sometimes I feel like my thoughts are being affected by something maybe demonic, and it's real weird because I know that it's happening, and then I have to adjust my, I say to myself, okay, tomorrow is going to be this, I'm going to go through this period of suffering, but I know tomorrow it's going to be different, so I'm not going to let it.
It's a fine line because I've been through paranoia and I've been through hallucinations, and they're very similar to spiritual experiences like that, where you think you know that there's an angel or demon. Now, I'm not saying those things don't happen and that didn't happen for you, but I've had spiritual experiences and I've had hallucinations. So it's hard to tell them apart unless you go a little bit further along the spiritual path, maybe even from where I am. But a lot of the time I can identify them. But it's a bit difficult. We have to do the best we can in the moment and just try to make the best decision, whatever is influencing us or not influencing us.
Right. Yeah. I think it's based on how you